of Diddy like shooting people,
Yeah.
blowing up cars.
Yeah.
Is he this gangster that behind the scenes is that him? Or is that people
Shout
running?
out to Wendy Williams.
And what's really going to be interesting is the parade of celebrities who we expect to be mentioned and or called into that courtroom. You know, people who we hadn't heard about prior, like Mike Myers, you know, Austin Powers, Mike Myers. Why is he getting called? Why is he on the witness list? That'll be fascinating. And then, of course, there are the no-name, quote unquote, women who are going to have to find every ounce of courage they have.
They called it a tragic accident, a drowning, a freak ocean current that snatched away one of television's most enduring figures while he was just trying to enjoy a quiet family vacation in Costa Rica. But now, just weeks later, the whispers inside that Manhattan federal courtroom are making everyone wonder, was Malcolm-Jamal Warner's demise really just a tragic accident? Or was it a cleanup job for something much, much darker?
And then what's the stuff that's happening with Wendy Williams? You think this is all connection to?
Of course.
Because here's where things get chilling. New allegations from inside the Diddy trial have cracked open a Pandora's box, and Warner's name is now being floated in the unlikeliest and most dangerous contexts. That same circle of elite industry gatekeepers connected to Diddy's so-called social empire, Warner had apparently crossed paths with them, and not in a handshake at the Grammys kind of way. We're talking quietly entangled, maybe even threatening to expose something. And then he drowned, alone, in open water, with only one unidentified man who tried to save him and has since gone eerily silent.
Look, they once worked together a long time ago. They're not friends now. They don't like each other. And yeah, 50 has taken every shot, especially when Diddy has been down.
So let's rewind just a bit. July 20, Playa Grande, Costa Rica. Malcolm-Jamal Warner, age 54, in the ocean. He goes under. Paramedics try for 20 minutes to revive him, but it's no use. The official report says asphyxiation by submersion. But now, insiders close to the Diddy legal proceedings are suggesting that Warner wasn't just a bystander to this mess. He may have been a loose thread, and someone didn't want him unraveling it. Because just like that, this warm-hearted TV brother and Grammy-winning musician might have gone from beloved icon to threat. And that changes everything. What makes this even harder to ignore is the strange convergence of timing. Just weeks before his final trip, Warner had launched season 2 of his podcast, Not All Hood, and his tone had taken a turn. The first episode, full of coded language, sharp reflections on exploitation in the entertainment world, and a fire-in-the-belly conviction that he was finally ready to talk. We've managed to navigate through the murky waters of child stardom with our souls and dignity intact, he said, reflecting with co-host Kashia Knight Pulliam. But listen closer and you'll hear it, there was more he wasn't saying. The kind of tension that brews when someone's finally sick of playing polite. When a man's about to name names.
I hate to bring up the sad news, but news did break today of the untimely passing of Malcolm-Jamal.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
And then, just like that, he's gone. People close to the podcast say Warner had started drafting more episodes that touched on themes he hadn't dared to unpack before. How young talents get mentored into silence, how certain powerful figures keep entire careers hostage, and how even Emmy-nominated actors like himself had watched friends fall into carefully orchestrated traps. The podcast had only just begun peeling back the glossy surface when Warner went into that water. Could that podcast have made him a target?
Yeah.
Blowing up cars.
Yeah.
Is he this gangster that behind the scenes is that him? Or is that people
Shout
running?
out to Wendy Williams.
Because if you ask 3 different insiders from the late 90s SARNB scene about Warner's relationship to the music world, you'll get the same raised eyebrow. One of them, a former road manager for an LA label, insists Warner was present at more than one gathering at Diddy's Los Angeles compound, back in the early 2000s. Not as a regular, but enough to observe. He saw what went down. He didn't engage, but he saw, the source said. Another veteran from the BET production side claims Warner had privately voiced his discomfort with what he called weaponized mentorship. A system where promising actors and artists were promised guidance, then kept on a leash. None of that made it into the obituaries. Even more bizarre is what we now know about the person who tried to save him in Costa Rica, a 29-year-old man from Nicaragua. No name, no press interviews, just a brief confirmation from the Costa Rican Red Cross that he had been in critical condition, hospitalized, then released with no complications. The guy dives into the water to save Malcolm-Jamal Warner, nearly drowns himself, survives, and vanishes. Not one news outlet has tracked him down. The local authorities confirmed he had no personal connection to Warner. So, what was he doing there?
Early morning swim, he had gone out to the coastline just before sunrise and a little after sunrise. got into the water. Not too many details about what exactly happened once he was in the water, but authorities did end up finding his body actually hundreds of yards away down the shoreline. His body was discovered in a rocky cove. It was brushed up against that rocky cove.
Here's what stings. No one seems to be asking the right questions. The Costa Rican Red Cross declared Warner lifeless at the scene after 20 minutes of CPR. But eyewitnesses, locals who work along Playa Grande, have since told reporters that the unidentified man was already in the water before the panic started. He wasn't a bystander rushing in after screams. He was swimming nearby, watching, maybe even waiting. It's a very different story. And it gets creepier when you consider how quiet Diddy's circle has been since Warner's name started coming up in courtroom whispers. No denial, no clarification, just silence. The kind of silence that only tightens the noose, especially when this whole freak-off trial is forcing jurors and journalists to confront the idea that entire careers were manipulated, bent, or broken in those exclusive private rooms. If Warner ever witnessed anything firsthand, he would have been both a liability and a symbol. A man with credibility, family values, and a podcast mic.
The judge right now is going through a number of different reasons. Again, very quick reporting indicates that the judge is citing to the defense attorney's own statements during the case that Sean Combs is a violent person, has had violent personal relationships. But of course, the defense said that doesn't mean he's guilty of racketeering. It looks like the judge is now using those statements to say he should be denied bail.
Let's not forget the footage released just weeks before his passing. Malcolm playing bass guitar on stage in Atlanta, vibrant, smiling, surrounded by fans. It didn't look like a man who was retreating from public life. It looked like a man ramping up, getting visible. He had a daughter he adored, a wife he protected, and a legacy he was finally reclaiming. And that's what makes this loss feel orchestrated. Because drowning may be a natural cause, but motive? That's rarely so wet and clean. We have to look at patterns. Diddy's defense team has painted him as a man who indulged in private, consensual arrangements, but the court wasn't buying all of it. He's sitting in a jail cell right now because the jury did find his behavior crossed legal lines. And if someone like Warner was planning to revisit what he witnessed or call out a system that's still very much intact, then his disappearance starts to feel less accidental and more convenient. What about the digital breadcrumbs? Warner's last social media posts were unusually reflective. Several close-up photos, nostalgic quotes, even a repost of an old article about artist burnout. And while the tone wasn't alarming, it was unusually vulnerable. For someone who'd just launched a new podcast and had plans to collaborate with younger creators, he sounded like a man preparing for something or protecting something. Meanwhile, Kashia Knight Pulliam, his longtime friend and podcast co-host, said in her tribute that Warner was an angel and that she promised to look after our girls, a reference to their daughters who had grown close. But in another Instagram story, she added, "I've just needed a moment." Some fans online now believe that line had a double meaning. Was she shaken by more than grief? Was she trying to process a reality that doesn't line up with the official narrative?
I want to start with alleged victim number 4, who goes by the name Mia. It's an alias. She is one of the people who is testifying where the judge has granted her anonymity. She is on the stand, but everybody in the courtroom has been warned. Do not reveal her identity. Do not even give a physical description of her.
One chilling Reddit thread claims a production assistant who worked with Warner in early June said he spoke about feeling watched and that he was wary of a few industry people resurfacing. That post was deleted within 24 hours, but screenshots exist. And the assistant allegedly named one of Diddy's longtime business associates as someone who tried to contact Warner out of the blue earlier this summer, someone who had once promised to get him a big budget comeback. That comeback never came. There's a growing sense that Warner may have known too much, stayed silent for too long, and finally decided to speak. But if that's true, he never got the chance. Whether the courtroom whispers prove anything concrete or not, they've already done one thing. They've shattered the illusion, because now we can't unsee the connections, the coincidences, the timing. Warner didn't live like a man in fear, but he passed in circumstances that demand scrutiny. And still, no one has officially named the rescuer, no interview, no photograph, just a silent discharge from a local hospital, and a blank spot where a face should be.
I'm sorry, I'm just I'm in this moment right now. This is crazy. Sorry. People don't really know how much what it does to you when something that you love is taken from you and thrown away like it don't even matter, and then they move on with their lives and you're stuck. You're stuck during those years. You're still stuck 21 years later.
And now the questions get louder. Not just about Malcolm-Jamal Warner's tragic fate, but about the hidden machinery that might have orchestrated it. Because if we step back and zoom out, this isn't about one man and one drowning. This is about a decades-long system that has allegedly wrapped itself around the throat of Hollywood, feeding off ambition, manufacturing silence, and punishing those who slip out of line. Diddy may be behind bars, but his empire, if the allegations are true, was never built for just one man. It was a network, a web, and every web has others still crawling across the strands. Let's talk about those gatekeepers, the shadow players who, according to insiders, formed a closed-circle syndicate that operated beneath the surface of both the music and film industries. It wasn't just about power, it was about ownership. Young stars weren't just guided, they were groomed, and once they were inside the circle, the doors quietly locked behind them. Names that haven't yet been dragged into court filings are whispered on the sidelines of film sets, red carpets, and Grammy rehearsals. If Warner ever tried to open one of those doors, especially with a live mic in his hand and a podcast gaining steam, then his disappearance becomes more than a coincidence. It becomes strategic.
How many people came through his orbit? How many people could this have happened to? And how did he get away with it for so long?
Here's the hard truth that few in the industry want to acknowledge. Diddy might be sitting in a cell, but the infrastructure he allegedly helped create is still in motion. Executives who partied with him, agents who facilitated, lawyers who scrubbed contracts clean, stylists, assistants, security teams, all with their hands in the machine. The sentencing set for October is being framed as a final chapter, but what if it's just the pilot episode of a much uglier saga? And that brings us back to Warner's final days. Keshia Knight Pulliam's tribute seemed sweet on the surface, but listen to her language. "I just needed a moment," she wrote. "We got our girls." That's not just mourning, that's coded pain, a kind of heartbreak that comes from knowing you couldn't stop something you saw coming. Pulliam and Warner had shared decades of friendship. She was on his podcast just before he passed. Did she hear something in his voice? Did she read between the lines of what he didn't say? Some are now reading Keshia Knight Pulliam's Instagram posts, not just as tributes, but as carefully coded messages. Her repeated emphasis on our girls has drawn speculation that Warner had taken steps to protect not only his daughter, but hers as well, perhaps from something he believed was coming. Family friends say Warner had grown increasingly protective in the weeks before his passing, canceling appearances, limiting social outings, and insisting on private security for an event that, until then, had been casual. These weren't the actions of a man feeling carefree on vacation. They were the quiet moves of someone who believed the walls were closing in.
The question is he a criminal? Is he basically akin to a mob boss running several criminal enterprises? And while it's very clear to me he is a depraved, disgusting person, we have to prove that he violated the law.
Sources close to Warner's household have whispered about private conversations he'd had with loved ones, hushed warnings, uneasy mentions of being watched, and fears about people from the past resurfacing. One close confidant, who asked not to be named, reportedly claimed that Warner had even considered pulling back from public life entirely by the end of the year, retreating to focus on fatherhood and leave the spotlight behind. That decision, if true, suggests a man preparing for something or someone he no longer trusted, and it raises the grim possibility that his final days were shadowed by more than just family outings and podcast plans. What deepens the mystery is how tightly his inner circle has clung to silence. None have given interviews, and many who had once been vocal on social media went dark in the days following his passing. Even Pulliam, known for her warmth and transparency, has limited her posts to short, heartfelt captions, never naming names, never elaborating. It's the kind of restraint that hints at unspoken knowledge. If Warner did confide in those closest to him, and if they now carry the weight of secrets he didn't get to share publicly, then his demise becomes more than personal loss. It becomes a warning, one written between the lines.
Let's talk about the filth that's starting to come out in the early days of the Diddy trial. This, of course, is P. Diddy. Surprise, surprise, he's a creep. Surprise, surprise, he's done horrible things.
What's haunting is that the same week Warner's podcast teased deeper conversations about industry exploitation, Diddy's attorneys were filing motions to reduce his jail time. His team argued that he was being unfairly punished for arranging private, consensual encounters. But buried in the government's evidence were threads that prosecutors claimed pointed to a much darker reality: coercion, manipulation, and a chilling level of control over the people closest to him. 2 women testified that they were pushed into orchestrated scenarios designed for spectacle, not consent. A security video showed violence. One federal investigator called it corporate-level manipulation masquerading as entertainment. Now imagine Warner had deeper knowledge of those operations, not because he participated, but because he witnessed. Maybe at parties, maybe through friends, maybe because someone confided in him, trusting that Theo Huxtable would never sell them out. What happens when the trustworthy man becomes the liability? One producer who worked on a 2011 sitcom reboot with Warner claimed he had once mentioned Diddy offhandedly, saying, "He's got too many people watching people." It didn't seem like a direct accusation, more like a reflection. But the memory has taken on new weight in hindsight, especially when we consider that some of Diddy's alleged accomplices, those who prosecutors said helped arrange freak-off encounters, have yet to be charged. They've walked free, without even an ankle monitor. And if Warner had access to any firsthand insight on those names, that's motive.
Unfortunately, we're all going to take a disgusting trip to his seedy, awful world. You know, the man has no class. He has no kindness in his dark, dark heart. And he's depraved. That's my opinion. This is a depraved, disgusting individual about whom I wish to hear nothing after this trial is done.
Multiple court watchers noted that Warner's name was quietly mentioned in pre-trial documents that were never publicly released. One paralegal said his name was flagged in a metadata sweep connected to digital correspondence during the investigation. The prosecution hasn't commented, but it begs the question, what was Warner's actual proximity to this mess? Was he simply adjacent, or was he on the verge of becoming a key witness?
You know, in a court proceeding that has nothing to do with Wendy's career. Moreover, that were made in front of Wendy Williams. If true, that is outrageous, because this judge, one, she's not in the entertainment industry, so I don't know where she would get off opining about that and why that's even relevant to her role as a judge, who's basically the judge of the law.
And then there's the eerie behavior of the gatekeepers themselves, the quiet unfollowing on social media, the cryptic tributes. One veteran stylist who'd worked with both Diddy and Warner posted a single candle emoji with the words, "Not unexpected, but still hurts." The post vanished hours later, no names, no context, but the implication was deafening. We also can't ignore the growing online chatter linking Warner's final podcast recordings to broader legal anxieties. A recent upload featured audio distortions and missing timestamps, leading fans to speculate that portions may have been edited after his passing. Some even believe there were files on Warner's personal laptop allegedly recovered by family that hinted at a list of collaborators he no longer trusted. We haven't seen the contents, but multiple gossip forums claim the list included names that would blow up 3 networks. It all comes down to one ugly possibility: that Warner was not a target by chance, but by design. That as Diddy's empire began to fracture, someone saw Warner as an open tab that needed to be closed. Not because he had broken any laws, but because he might have been willing to testify against those who had. And if that's true, who else is on that list? We're left with a reality that's hard to digest. The good guys don't always make it out. The voices we trust get cut short, and the masterminds behind the curtain, they know how to wait, how to pivot, how to survive long enough to rebuild. So now we ask, if Malcolm-Jamal Warner's demise was no accident, who might be next? What other truths are waiting to surface before they get silenced? Drop your theories below and hold your heroes tight. The storm isn't over. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and stay watching.